Hey folks, Steve here with another BCS video. We're going to be doing turn 3 of the Arracourt campaign, or more than turn 3. I guess it's really going to depend on how much I show on camera as we move forward. A previous video covering turn 2 was a 30-minute, 35-minute video, because I cut out most of the hemming and hawing and pushing stuff around, which makes for a cleaner video. I may continue to do that here and maybe even move faster so that we can get through maybe even a couple turns in this video. By the time you're watching this, you're going to see the title of the video, so you're going to know better than me, at least in the way that you're watching the video. So we'll get underway pretty quickly here. So with turn 3, we do get some reinforcements for the Americans. I have decided, because they're infantry, to supplement some of the forces that I feel need it the most. So I've given Combat Command B of the 6th Armor some infantry, and I've also given the Combat Command A of the 4th Armor some infantry. That is to help, well, help stay alive, really. That's kind of the goal for them at the moment. And then in addition to that, also came the tank destroyer that I deferred reinforcement on and is with the Combat Command A of the 4th Armor as well. So they now have some additional support for their units. Now, what I have also done is because I was getting this support, which I definitely want to utilize with that force, I decided to make the armor you see here real units. Say, hey, where'd those come from? Well, managed to roll better on the replacements, and in fact, it's almost an inverse of the last die roll. The Germans get none. I rolled a 2, but the Americans rolled a 4, which means they get 2 armor value or armor value replacement steps and 1 non, so functionally infantry. They use that to try to beef up this injured unit here, and then we spend both points bringing those 2 armor units back at 1 step. Now, it's kind of a tough decision here. You can, I believe, you can only bring back steps to units in 1-step increments every turn. So I couldn't bring one of those armor units back at 2 steps. I don't believe I could do that. However, the one thing that matters here is that I certainly wanted to, rather than add a step to some other army unit on the board, I wanted to get these guys back on the map, both so that they can get, ideally, replacements in future turns, and to help offset the deficit of armor victory points, or I guess dead armor units that will lead to a victory point. So trying to get that armor back into the field. The armor pool there, the repair facilities, whatever's we're doing, new units being brought in to get that armor back in shape is important. And because we're able to put these adjacent, probably what I should have done is put this guy right here. That makes more sense. I can put them adjacent to the HQ, and so I am doing that. Which helps because now we're projecting armor Zocs in front of the combat train in the HQ, so they're not easy pickings for the Germans. So that all came out really good for the Americans. The other interesting thing, and I'm going to have to be super careful now this turn, is that the fog has cleared. We rolled a 5 for weather, meaning we have good visibility out to 4 hexes maximum for spotting. The full engagement ranges of things are in play, which is actually kind of a tricky concern, because now we have the potential to, as the Germans, at least for some units, outrange the Americans. This unit doesn't outrange the American units, so that's kind of a wash. But there's going to be some potential for the Germans to make use of their range advantage wherever they can find it. But so too, the the Americans are going to benefit from the clear skies for their air power. Now, I only rolled a 2 for the air point roll, which means the Americans get 2 at large air artillery, no, not air artillery, gosh, air points that function as artillery that I can use whenever I choose without assigning it to an HQ. And we also get the Bazooka Charlie point as well. So that will help. And the fact that we now have spotting out to 4 hexes means we can kind of pick our targets. Now that goes for the Germans as well with their artillery. So I've gotten so used to the fog of having to get right up next to the enemy to be effective. Well, now that the visibility is increased and trafficability is all good and all that, it now really changes the situation. We don't have to go as far to dish out at least some degree of damage, and we can take pot shots, one die at a time at enemy units if we wanted to. I still find the most efficient way to use artillery and air points is as destruction barrages in clear terrain. So this is maybe my one strategy comment for for this game system is, if you're attacking an enemy in decent terrain or something, or they get some defensive bonus, you should use artillery probably for that suppression bonus because you get a lot of point increase for the die roll. That's really important. You're going to want to do that a lot. In fact, so I'd say like, boy, it's circumstantial, but the suppression artillery bonus really powerful. You use 1 artillery point, you get the suppression bonus. That bonus is going to make a big difference in the die roll. If you're attacking an enemy in clear terrain, you don't really, I would argue, most of the time, or maybe against, it might depend on the unit that you're fighting. Let's assume it's a soft target, not a hard target. You are, assuming you have the artillery, you're actually probably better off using destruction barrages if you can spend up to 3 dice on it, because while you don't get the plus, whatever, the +2 or +1, depending on the combat type, to the die roll, just as part of the attack, you get to roll the barrages and you can roll up to 3 dice, which could mean that you deal 3 step losses right off the bat before the combat even occurs. Which, even if you roll poorly on the combat die roll, you've done more step losses than the very best combat roll could cause the enemy, with die rolling alone, right? Like the best normal combat result you can get against the enemy, against the defender, is a defender 2 step loss. So maybe you get lucky and you get both, right? You get high barrage hits, hit on all 3. You do 2 losses because you rolled high on the combat dice with all the bonuses. You got a 13 or something. You could potentially destroy an entire unit all in one fell swoop of concentration of forces, but you're not likely to do that. And I'll say that, it's like, hey, are you willing, you might lose a step as the attacker in some cases, but do you have enough infantry to absorb that hit and meanwhile do possibly 3 steps from artillery? I find that to be very potent, very, very powerful, in terms of eliminating units. And it all depends on your goal too, I guess, right? If you want to retreat, maybe you focus on suppression. If you think you can, and you cause that retreat because you want to take the hex, whether victory point hex or good terrain or whatever, or maybe the easiest way to get that unit out of there is to simply bombard them into smithereens, in which case you go for the destruction barrage. So it's that interesting thought process of how do I want to use my resources most effectively here to do the thing that I really want to do, and all that comes together pretty interestingly. So a whole new dynamic to the campaign with the weather here being clear. Changed my thought processes on some things. I'm looking at uh, even the units over here in Combat Command B of the 4th Armor, and seeing that these units. Okay, so he can be out to range 2 if we flip him to combat mode, which he's not in yet. Um, that it could mean that German armor could be taking some pot shots and wearing thin those units of steps until they come into closer combat range. So there's all these now different puzzle uh, considerations to think through here, um, and I've got to figure out what that will look like. So anyway, and then finally, we did the initiative die roll or first player determination. I just think of that as initiative, and the Germans won. So the Germans will get to go first. There's one other special rule that we need to accommodate here in the game, which hasn't really been a factor yet, and that is enforced recovery. So this is 1.3 of the game specific rules. Uh, so both players simultaneously conduct the following in order: fatigue 3 decision. So if I look out at the map, all the German formations have either fatigue 0 or 1, or 2. And the Americans have a lot of fatigue 2s, but they do have a fatigue 3 in that combat command B on the north side of the map. Any formation with a fatigue 3 must choose one of the following: flip its HQ to used, not done, and function normally in the turn with an HQ starting used. Remember, it must try for a second activation, and as such, it cannot apply a failure flip on snafu fail. And then um, flip its HQ to done and reduce to fatigue 2. So I have to make a decision with these guys. Do they uh, basically go, and if I look on the back of this, he's a 3 or higher. So I could try to push these guys further and say, no, I'm going to make them used, not done. This will force them to have to try to activate and have a pretty good chance of doing it. So they'll be able to activate, but they've got a roll to activate. If I take that chance, I'm taking a basically 1 in 3 chance of them not getting to do anything and not recovering fatigue by trying to push them on. Um, or I can just say, okay, yeah, they're not going to do anything this turn, and we recover to fatigue 2. Now, because fatigue 3 has such a nasty penalty on the snafu roll, I can't even be sure that they would be able to operate very effectively at all. Um, so it's really tough. It's an incredibly tough decision that we're going to have to make as the Americans. Do we try to get these guys activating this turn to move in? Problem will be, if we do, there's a pretty decent chance they're going to go to fatigue 4, and then there's a rule for that, and they're going to have to flip to done and recover. So I have a decision to make. Is it going to do me any good to try to outflank the Germans and maybe end up in a pretty bad position where they're going to be stuck wherever they go? Or do we simply hold fast at the moment and let the combat command A of the Fourth Armor just do its fighting on its own for the moment? And this could be a very critical decision. I think what we'll do, I don't know, we're going to go ahead and let this guy go down to fatigue 2, and they'll be done for the turn. This is a tough call, but again, if we try to activate, let's say we got lucky and we get the second activation, but that -3 fatigue, we get let's say we fail snafu, then we get nothing. We don't even get the fatigue recovery in that case. Or we get a partial, but the partial, like, we can't meaningfully affect the game situation, and now we're maybe hurting even more. Um, I don't know. Um, a partial snafu could do what for us? Could um, we could at least threaten the German flank and maybe try to relieve some pressure. Maybe it is worth it. Never mind. Yeah, let's just never mind. See, this is why I shouldn't do all these recordings on camera, because I'm getting stuck making oddball decisions. So okay, so we're going to just flip him to uh, used, and we'll end up rolling for him to activate. My thinking is I'll probably end up with a partial snafu. Fair enough. But then we'll try to move forward, set up on a position anchored on the river, and hold here, and then maybe do a better job on the next turn or something. Because if we just move and we don't do combat, we won't gain a fatigue, and then maybe we can afford to take the pause after that. So okay, with that done, that decision making done, it's now just the Germans' HQ activation to start the turn. So I'm gonna think through that decision. I'll play through that activation. If something very interesting starts to occur, we'll show that, um, and we'll show the aftermath if it's just hunky dory otherwise. Okay, the first German activation, I did go with this formation in the north. Couple of things occurred here. We did take some pot shots with engagement rolls. We pinged down this screening unit a little bit, and also fired at an American unit that was here. We managed to drop support on it. We failed an attack by fire, and then we took a risk, and we took the German unit off this really important road to try to attack. We succeeded in causing a step loss and forced a retreat back to its HQ with its temporarily dropped support. Now, when the activation ends, support returns to the unit, though the tank destroyers with this formation are now down to 2 steps from their maximum of 3. So Germans did some damage. It wasn't a huge activation ultimately. I guess it doesn't really need to be, but they want to keep this formation suppressed and down. And they failed their continuation roll, so they're functionally done. And then I went right to the Americans and I said, okay, well, here's the chance, right? We took the chance. We want to maybe try to activate these guys. I got the successful activation, but the snafu roll, just as I feared, and I rolled low. They failed, which means they didn't get to turn it into a failure flip, meaning they still have fatigue 3, and they didn't get to go anywhere. Which would have been nice to be able to go, let's say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, uh, 6, 7, whatever. We could have jumped an HQ, but it's not to be. Now the Germans are going to have to be careful because it's not like they've got an omnipotent force here. This stack still only has 1 step of armor. This guy's okay. And yeah, so I don't know. It's going to be kind of tricky to see what can be achieved here when the Americans can next go. But now it's back to the Germans, and I have a decision to make here as well. Do I begin or do I try to continue to shift this formation north, or do I buckle down because we have the Combat Command B of the 6th Armor coming north, and we want to be able to fight off these 2 formations here? That's kind of the situation we're in. Like, I'd have to decide what's the most valuable thing to try to achieve right this second. I I do think one of the things we want to try is maybe activating this stack, flipping this guy over, having him come into here, and then do some damage on the remnants of the 2nd Cav, and just support over here and make it hard to operate. I don't know. That takes them past the security of this location, though we may be able to do something else. I don't know. I'm gonna have to think about it. But the Germans have the next activation. We'll play through that and show the aftermath. Okay, here we are after the activation of the 113th. So we've continued to push back the screen. We soft jumped the Combat Command Reserve after first causing First causing the destruction of their engineering unit, which we eliminated by dropping its support and forcing it away, which kind of leaves um, this armor out here a little isolated, not literally isolated for attrition purposes, but um, certainly at a slight disadvantage here. Now, what the interesting thing will be here is if these guys activate, what are their options? Well, the last unit of the Combat Command Reserve here is the armor unit, and the last unit of the 2nd Cavalry is this recon unit that is down to its last step, thanks to some artillery firing of the Germans. So this whole section here is on the verge of collapse. And then what would happen here is these guys could come up and then have a firing duel with this armor, which, dicey. It's got this hill in the way. And what's really interesting is that the visibility in the blocking terrain still matters even in the good weather. So we have, woods, we have a hill, makes it hard for these guys to fire at each other immediately. Um, and I maybe pushed forward this infantry a little too far, but he does have red support. So if the Americans are going to try to fend him off, he at least has some staying power. So generally looking not good. And then it's really going to come down to this Combat Command B, like what can it do? I tried to beef it up with some infantry. The only problem is even on, well, no, I guess if I flip them to combat, these guys have a 7 armor combat rating for engagement. So these guys might be the difference makers here to try to pounce on the extension here, but we still have to keep in mind that the 15th is still operating, still has yet to be activated. So there's a lot of interesting little puzzle bits here, like what can be achieved. This armor, by the way, is kind of, maybe a little far off the beaten path. It's basically just doing firing engagements, forcing these recon units back from the 100th and 6th. So he's dinging them for some step losses, and one of them got hit with some artillery, or maybe that was a previous step loss from the turn before. So just keeping these guys away. These guys could maybe start taking the rail tracks up towards Lunaville, but they're not. They just don't have a good. They don't have a good position. They don't have a good position to leverage. Kind of period at this point. The best we might want to do is leverage the 2nd Cavalry Group's artillery. What I should have done is I should have taken this artillery point off to move it, because maybe what they can do is try to hit this guy for some artillery firing, and ding him for a few step losses. That might be valid. So I don't know. It's going back to the Americans now, so the Americans have to decide, do they try to make something happen here? Do they activate the 79th and they try to get across the river, or keep, pressuring? The one special thing we need to keep in mind is these infantry units can freely cross the river. They have the movement points to do it. I mean, the Zocs are kind of a weird thing right now, but you pick somewhere else. Well, the infantry could cross, but if they cross at a river crossing that doesn't have a road, that means they get a support drop marker, because one of these guys drop support, because the armor can't follow them over the river. So the game, it might miss the rule if you're not paying attention. That if infantry tries to cross prohibited terrain for tracks, and their support is AV, or they have support in AV, like that support can't follow them. They need to use roads to follow the infantry if they go marching over a river. So if I were to advance with the infantry, it puts them at a potential dangerous spot, because they don't have their support and they might get chewed up by the reaction of the Germans. So all these things are kind of coming together, a confluence of mechanics to make things very tricky. Alternatively, I could look to activate the Combat Command A of the 4th Armor over here, try to figure out a way to respond to what's been going on Just a lot of different things that could be done. Hard to say what should be done. So I'm going to play through the next American activation. I need to figure out what that is. Um, need to figure out what we can do to shift the momentum here. Really need to try to make something happen with hurting this German unit. So yeah, we'll see. I believe I forgot to roll fatigue for the 113th on their second activation. They did get to go again, and they don't get fatigued. So these guys are still in great shape as things progress. So yeah, okay, back to the Americans. Okay, we've actually played through a couple of activations because they got pretty anticlimactic. We had some failure on snafu rolls that we flipped to a fatigue recovery. We did that for the 79th. We ended up having to do that for the 21st Panzer as well. I really wanted to make something happen there, and we just didn't get it. So they had a recovery flip, a snafu failed a recovery, however you want to refer to that as well. We also had the remnants of the second cav try to activate and use some artillery, and we actually have pinged some guys with some artillery in our bazooka Charlie uh, activation over here, which I guess I forgot to set that. Here, pinging this guy down to one step left, so he's actually very susceptible. And now we are, and then we shifted over to here, which has led to the 15th division of the Germans go, and they got a back-to-back activation. They got lucky and managed to push through and are now, I would not call this mixed, but they're close to being mixed with this formation here, but they kind of pushed through along the roads, causing further pain to the American Combat Command A and forcing retreats. Not quite able to get rid of this screen, which is just has been a real problem. Though we can force it to retreat, and they've basically been trying to do that as much as they can, leaving behind some security forces, other forces holding road junction lines in case these guys start to get particularly, bold in the counterattack space. So things are just, kind of still solid for the Germans. They're doing very well here. And now it's going to come back to the Americans, and they really only have a couple activations left. Basically, our blue formation here, the Combat Command A, and then the Combat Command B of the 6th Armor here. And technically, oh yeah, we can actually, we still haven't activated these guys yet with their one unit left. Not sure what I'm going to be able to do here other than try to pull him back and maybe around to, I don't know. So it's going to be three American activations right in a row. I can probably play through each one without showing you the aftermath because there's only so much each is going to be able to achieve, perhaps. Now what I'll probably do is go from right to left because this will be the big one to see, like, can we try to shift our weight a little bit here with the Americans and leverage our forces for something a little more helpful than where they've been at for the moment. So um, yeah, I'll go take care of that. But yeah, this turn so far has been still a pretty decent one for the Germans. Okay, here we are. We're essentially at the end of turn three. So the Combat Command Reserve pulled back their armor. He went this way, came out around, and performed a shock attack. Well, he dropped support and then did a shock attack that actually, I guess I can remove this temp marker, forced this infantry to retreat back to its HQ. And so for now, these remnant forces at least have an opportunity to breathe for a second. Comet Command B, they didn't get a good activation. They got a partial. They also failed to activate again. So really just trying to project some force out there, see what we can do on the next next turnaround to try to, I don't know. It's like I don't have enough oomph really to make a big play anywhere in particular. And then the final bit here, and I guess I need to, yeah. The final bit here is that the Combat Command of the 4th Armor, Combat Command A, actually went, their first activation was a partial. They were able to make some adjustments, fire a few shots of engagement, and then what ended up happening was they lost both of their Step 1 armor, eliminating one of the German armor units. Now, that was a purposeful play. I weighed the odds, and I said, you know what? Losing both of these guys again is worth eliminating that German unit right now. And so now this whole group here, the armor, their hard red armor, is down to 1 step because the other unit was destroyed, and he's just asking to get dinged. And I actually forgot to use the rest of my air, so I've got at least one shot on him, and he is dead. I forgot to roll for him on the second activation, and I had an artillery shot left for air, and kaput, as it were. So with that, the there's definitely a now dangerous situation for the Germans. They had done very well, but formations in this game are hardy. You haven't necessarily knocked them clean out of the gate. If they get pushed back a lot, they can try to push back. But then on the second activation, so to be clear, that air point shot I just took and got a 6 was technically the end of the second activation for this formation. They managed to go again, and they used it to attack this exposed infantry here, and managed to do 3 step losses to it. So they've created no safe path for this unit. I probably need to apply a marker there. But they've managed to do some counter punch here a little bit that actually opens up the door for a lot of pain on the enemy. The only problem is now, from that second activation, their fatigue went up to 3. So we have both the main combat commands of the 4th Armor are at 3 fatigue, which means they can either, going in an extra, they can risk trying to go again, and it may not work very well, or they take a rest, and right now doesn't feel like the time to take a rest. Now feels like the time to go, baby, go. So I may have to take a risky action to make some more progress. That's kind of the decision making situation we're in, because right now there is a clear, beautiful path to the HQ, and the other remnant units are here and here, and we have an opportunity to really bang up these forces pretty badly if we can get to go first and we start activating. Maybe we activate these guys and can do all sorts of fun stuff that would really allow the Americans to now project force east again, try to go back for Arracourt, and reinforcements will eventually show up that will help them with some much needed artillery strength. So there's still a lot of possibilities left here to explore, and the Americans aren't out of it yet. They're having a hard time over here, that's true, but if they can push the situation over here, they can get some good replacements, get the armor back on the board, start chipping away. The red support on these units is only it's 1 step. So the Americans could start to push back, start to chip away at the German positions, try to injure the 15th here, the red band forces, and maybe get some momentum working for themselves again. So we'll have to see. I think we've got enough time that I'm going to try to do turn 4. So let me get through the sort of beginning preliminary steps of turn 4, and we'll see what the weather is and all that good stuff. Okay, here we are after the initial set. Unfortunately, or I don't know how you want to look at it, the fog is back. So it is foggy once again. And unfortunately for the Americans, they only managed to roll well enough for air points to get Bazooka Charlie, and that is it. So once more back down to low visibility, no more ranged pot shots of artillery or air points. Which is going to kind of affect both sides in interesting ways. So we're going to be stuck with that. When it came to the replacements, the Americans rolled well. They got a 4, which means they got the 2 armor replacements needed to bring their armor back, thank goodness, and a non-armor which they used to bring this mechanized infantry up a bit from where it was at, holding that kind of back door along the stream there. And now, I mean, the gamble that we took is kind of paid off a bit. Where yes, the Americans are refielding their armor. The Germans who had chased them away have not been able to replace those, and now provides an opportunity for the Americans to kind of have their own little counteroffensive and make some ground up that way. Problem is, again, we've got that fatigue 3. That's really going to affect our ability to operate. And perhaps most importantly, it should be said, that the Germans got the first player role. So the Germans once again are going first, which means they're probably going to activate these guys first and move these guys in such a way to try to protect their now the Germans flank, because they're in a tough situation. There's not that much more that can be done to save it. Um, they Yeah, so tricky bits. The Germans got some reinforcements here, nothing too crazy. The Americans got some additional infantry for the 79th. They're swimming in infantry, not much to do with it yet. um, maybe they really ought to just cross the river without support and just see what they can get done. But it puts them just in a very sticky situation. I don't want to do that. I want to come in with force across that river properly and really break things open. The one thing we need to keep in mind is that next turn, right here, the French are going to show up on the German flank, and that could be what cements some additional pain uh, on the Germans here. The Germans just have they're doing so good holding this river line, holding their positions, um, that it's really tough to see, where if the French were to fail somehow over here. Let's say they come onto the map and they try to come out of that entry hex and they just can't get out. It could be that they slowly attrit away as the Germans just continue to push on them. Um, we are pulling back some artillery from the second cav group to reassign next turn to a more deserving formation, probably. So the very first thing we're going to have to decide, and the Germans will need to do this as well, is decide whether or not we're going to have the fatigue 3 formations uh, rest or push. And we have to see if there's an order that they need to do this in, because that might really matter here. Any formation with FAT 3 must choose one of the following. Um, before orders. Oh, so before the player determination. Crap. You're supposed to do this simultaneously. I don't know how. Like in this situation, I'd be looking right. Like, what's my opponent doing? Is he just having these guys go to done or what? I think the Americans need to seize the initiative, and I think both of these guys are going to set up to where they're going to roll to go again, but they have a very high likelihood of being able to do it, and they're going to try to go and then capitalize on their gains. We would think that they'd have done this, not knowing that the Germans were going to go first. And then for these guys, I think they will actually rest and go to fatigue 2. Um, but that means that these guys are just totally done, which is fair. And then let's see, anybody else in the state? It's just the Germans that need to decide if they're going to do it or not. And at this point, I mean, they're kind of holding ground. So I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and let them drop to 2 fatigue here and be done. Um, just because they need a second to pause. Now maybe the best time to do it and just relax a bit. They don't need to do much but hold for the moment, and everyone else can just continue to operate. So with that, that makes the decision really easy for the Germans to select the 100th and 11th to activate, and what they're really going to try to do is save their own bacon here a little bit and try to cover their flank. Maybe try to relieve this guy because he's going to take isolation losses if we don't try to save him. So we're going to try something there. So yeah, let me play through some of that and we'll show what happens. So here's the aftermath of that first activation. We had this guy in movement side, which is truck, came moving through and arrived here with the idea that he was going to assist in a combat here. The Germans managed to force the Americans to retreat, no step losses, but they did basically get put back into a non-isolated state. They did get fatigue, and they did succeed in getting a second activation, but they failed the snafu roll, which does allow a flip. So that guy was put back onto his deployed side, so he had a better action rating for the inevitable counterattack that may come from the Americans. So that was that activation. I think I want to try to activate these guys here. And so we're going to go ahead and do the die roll. And we made it so they can activate. So we'll activate these guys. We'll see what can be done. I think we want to try to make use of these primary roads and start to affect the backfield. Now, because the Germans got to go first, they put a pioneer here on the main road, but they may be able to simply push him out of the way with enough force and really disrupt the German formation. So we'll see how it goes. What I would probably want to do is have the armor unit run his way up over here, fire to drop support, and then follow that up with the other units to try to clear him out and open the door to the HQ. That's my thinking right now. We'll see where it goes. The nice thing is this formation, which we haven't really gotten to use very much of, has a total of 3 artillery, 2 assigned and 1 inherent artillery. So 3 artillery could be used to pretty great effect to hurt, completely eliminate this unit very likely given they're in flat terrain. So this may be a really important activation. All right, this activation did see the combat command B strike out and is now, they managed to eliminate the Pioneer unit guarding the supply line, and they did soft jump the German HQ further back and are now in a position where these guys are going to be very soon out of command and in deep trouble here unless they can get out. But that activation, that formation's done for the turn. So the CCA could still go and then maybe seal the deal here. The Germans are going to have an opportunity, but they can't activate the 15th Panzer Panzer Grenadier division because they opted to recover, and so they are done. Which means that that while the Germans can do something else, when the Americans choose to operate here, they could deal a significant amount of damage and begin pushing on Arracourt. So the Germans are going to go next. They're going to have to figure something out. I think we want to maybe try maybe try to leverage either the 113th or the 21st to do something. Maybe relieve pressure, hurt the 79th Infantry, maybe try to make some dents against the rest of these American forces there. It's really hard to say. This is a beefy 6-step unit, and this one still has 5 steps. So it's the Americans can afford to fight and take losses more than the Germans can in this spot of the map. So I think that's going to be the tricky bit for them to compete with. Um, Maybe their one chance being some artillery, but the Germans don't get a lot of artillery, so they're going to be struggling here. I'll have to figure out right now what's the best move. We can only activate this formation or this formation, so our options are limited. Okay, so I decided to activate the 113th, who came down and at last eliminated the 2nd Cavalry, so they're basically out of the game. Also tried to put some pressure on this armor unit, and it just led to both sides taking some losses, which doesn't really benefit the Germans. Though we had dinged this guy up down here a little bit, the last unit of the CCR, still alive at the moment. So um, I don't know if that was, they got the 2nd activation, which is how they were able to dish out that much damage with basically that one armor, but it was a mighty bloody affair. I don't know that there's much more we would want to do. The fog is making this really tricky. We might have been able to do a lot more, but the fog is just the problem. So we go back to the Americans, and I think what we may want to do is uh, try to make something happen. I don't know about over here, um, but we could take our Bazooka Charlie shot at this guy and just see if we can take him out. So I might activate these guys, try to knock him out with a lucky die roll of 6, and then that would open up the way to get across the river and hold a position. Um, yeah, so maybe we'll try that. Okay, so we did activate the 106th. Bazooka Charlie missed, but these guys rolled up and managed to roll boxcars and eliminated that last armor, or the armor unit that came from the 113th. Tried to roll up and tried to fire on this guy, but they rolled kind of the opposite and took a step loss. So could have been better, but hey, you know what? I'll take the shot, certainly, and I won't fire again because I don't want that unit to just die right this second. But hey, it wasn't a bad shot, a bad try. If we can attrit the Germans away, we can win that way. So now we'll go back to the Germans. They really don't have much choice here. They're going to have to activate. Let's see. Yeah, they're done. They're done. Certainly. The only ones left are the 21st Panzer, which means they're going to have to go before the 79th Infantry. So I'm not sure what all that they're going to be able to do. They've got a couple of artillery points that they could use, the intrinsic artillery, that we could maybe continue to try to ding. Maybe get rid of this guy for one, and then see what else can be done. So let me see what happens there. All right, the 21st Panzer unfortunately only got a partial activation, so they kind of moved some units around. They did succeed at hitting that last step of that American unit with artillery, and then everybody kind of shifted down to cover the road crossings. So 106th Cav kind of not feeling so great. But now the Germans are done activating, so it's going to be the second attempt with uh, the Combat Command A. Then we're going to get to go with the Combat Command B of the 6th Army. Let's see, the red guys are done, and then we have the infantry. So I can kind of just execute whichever one I want at my leisure here to see what happens. I think the Americans are going to have to continue to try to make a crossing at the river. They want to be able to split the forces a bit here, and once they get across the river, that should open things up quite a bit, give them a lot more latitude to try to retake Luneville. So there's some steady momentum building, and the Germans are desperately waiting for their own reinforcements to show up, but they're still yet to come. So let me play through. Let me just do one quick thing. We'll go ahead and roll for these guys. We need a 3 or higher to activate again. And I rolled a 5, so they will get to activate again. We'll take care of this now. So we'll go from left to right now and see what we can do to hurt the Germans over here and maybe put ourselves in a really great position going into the next turn. Okay, here we are at what is basically the end of turn 4, and you can see that we did manage to just barely get a partial activation as the combat command A, and managed to eliminate a German infantry unit, temporarily drop support. I was trying to figure out, can they get support again, and I think that they can. Or no, they can't. So this is actually permanently drop support because there's a red Zoc here, there's a red Zoc here and here. So at the moment, this guy can't get his support back, so he's in trouble. And meanwhile, otherwise holding the position, so things are going to be looking real swell for the Americans in the north there for a second. Over here in the center, we did manage to eliminate a German armor unit, though we accepted terrible losses for it. So just kind of holding the way for the moment, eliminating German armor, getting set up to try to do something, though the American situation here is very weak. And then over here, we have once again tried to cross the river, willing to sacrifice some men for artillery firing that is draining German manpower quite a bit. So we're hoping to make a concerted crossing. The Germans are just running out of good positions to hold, especially as we begin to move more. That we only got a partial activation, so we couldn't do as much as I wanted. But as these guys start moving up, we're just putting so many steps that we can wear down the Germans, even holding the river line. And of course, next turn, those French are going to add a whole other pickle. So Germans are really just trying to hold on. Like, how can they hold on to these gains? Um, right now, the victory point split is 2-2 because the German armor losses are pretty heavy now. The Americans still hold one victory point while the Germans hold the other two, but it's starting to look like Arracourt is going to come under threat. So if the Americans can get in there, they'll be in good shape, though they need to be careful with the German reinforcements coming. So it's like, reinforcements, regroup. Fatigue is starting to hit pretty hard in some parts of the line, and other places it's very reasonable. We've gotten some pretty good die rolls for not gaining fatigue. It's just that over time that just builds up and you have to deal with it. And despite how good we're doing over here, we're going to have to still deal with it. So um, we'll see how that goes. I think that's it for the for turn 4. And let me double check here what we can expect for the next turn. Okay, yeah, the next reinforcement batch for turn 5 is just going to be that French formation. So whatever's on the map here, it's really going to be, uh, the Allies, the Americans are going to get the help from the French. Then there'll be a sequence of German reinforcements over the next couple of turns that may even things out. And then finally, right around here, we're going to get another smattering of infantry that if we can do well enough to grab Arracourt, I might send them up, try to send them going this way to relieve Lüneburg, depending on what the game situation is. So still tight. I mean, for a second there, it was looking like the Germans were going to win the day and just be in really great shape. But some chance good maneuvers and die rolls with the 4th Armor combat commands have kind of made it now a much closer game, which is good to see. I mean, it's like, oh man, here comes the Germans, but things have kind of evened out a little bit, and the snafu rolls are starting to matter. Not getting to activate at all has happened to several formations, which has allowed the enemy to kind of recoup losses or at least get situated better. I think this next coming turn's replacement points are going to matter a whole lot because if the Germans can't get their armor back onto the board anywhere because they've now lost most of it, um, that could be a major issue as the rest of their units are going to be relying on support to defend and have very little in the way of attack capability. So we'll see. Granted, I should point out that their red support still exists in multiple places. We've not managed to do enough damage to actually eliminate those single step support units. So hard to figure out where we can go with that as the Germans. Anyway, I think we'll call that a video. This is getting pretty long, so that's turns 3 and 4 of the campaign. And the next video we'll probably do turns 5 and 6, and we'll be basically halfway through the campaign, more or less. So see you in the next one, guys. Take care. Keep gaming.